My guest today is Mercedes Fernandez. Welcome to SoloMoms Talk, Mercedes.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Rosemarie. I'm very grateful to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get into the discussion of what you do, could you tell us who is Mercedes?
Yes, of course. I am Mercedes Fernandez, and I am a geriatric kinesiologist from California. I have been working with older adults because I was very close with my grandfather, and he played a very big part of who I am and what I do now. And I think the biggest part of me is I have this empathy and this really deep compassion to help others see the importance of working with older adults and the beauty of being with an aging adult. And that's my gift to the world. I want to help share that and bring some light there.
So this as we go forward, can you share with us what lesson you learned from having an aging adult family member close by?
Yes, I think that it's a juicy question first and foremost. There's so many lessons that come with that. I myself am relatively still young, I guess you can say. But like I said, I grew up with my grandfather from a very early age. My mother was ill when she had me, so my grandfather stepped in, and because of that bond, I think what I learned so much was, as I grew up with someone who I didn't see as old or aged, and he was like my father. What I've learned along the way, going through college and going through my life events, is that there's so much unconditional love, and you have your ups and your downs when you're with a family member who's aging. And when it came his time for me to take care of him, our roles reversed. I learned that love, that compassion, that care that he had for me was there for me to reciprocate. It always had been. And, learning what it's like to see someone who has cared for you is really shows you the way that we as humans evolve and kind of go back to that infant stage and need the same love, the same care when we were babies. And for me, I think what's my biggest lesson was, aside from the hardship with the medical system and all of the paperwork and the miscommunications with scheduling and the doctor's appointments and the medicine, yes, you have all of that craziness, but at the end of the day, it's a beautiful experience. I think the lesson is seeing the cyclical event of being an infant and kind of going through adulthood and going back to infancy.
Yeah, full circle, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate because I was raised by my grandfather from the time I was 9 months old. And he died in my arms when he was 75. So yeah, I can totally relate to that. Yeah. And I'm also somewhat involved in the assisting a 90-year-old uncle. So I think this is a very timely topic for us. So what are give us 3 things that could prepare us to take care of somebody or assist in the care of someone it doesn't have to be a family member. Actually, it could be anyone who is close to us may need care. What are some of the tips you could give to family members who are dealing with that or who are facing that right now?
Absolutely. I think what I often find, or what I've learned along the way, and I've had family members close to me and friends and clients who have taken on this journey. I think it's really important for anyone who's going through this to remember that it is, in fact, I don't like to say like a job, like a bad way, but it is taxing and there's a lot of work. And the one who is taking care, most of the time we are deeply are caregivers naturally. While we want to help, while we want to be there and, support and do the best that we can and extend ourselves, it is something to just be mindful of how much it will take an effect on your life, your body. Your daily routines will change. And that's not to scare anyone, but to have the mindfulness that when it does get overwhelming, you're not alone. It feels very isolating sometimes. It can, to feel like no one understands me. And I think oftentimes the second tip is finding a caregiver group in your area, or other caregivers that you can, kind of have like a coffee chat with, or a decompression chat, because oftentimes we need to talk to people. We need to just unload, and people who aren't caregivers won't understand. And I find that that's also a very challenging part of caring for someone. So giving yourself that support from other caregivers, and giving yourself that grace and the space to take care of yourself in the down times, or if you can find someone to switch with you for, maybe just at least 30 minutes, those moments are really important, because if our cup isn't full, how can we care for the person that we're caring for? So it's especially in that regard of making sure, if it's your first time, keep those in mind. If it's not your first time, it's still important to interweave those tips.
Right. Okay. So basically, if you're the only one, especially if you're the only person, or you're the go-to person for providing that care, and you're doing it yourself, then you need to remember that it's serious work. It's not play, right? It's serious work. And two, that while you're caring for that someone, to remember to take care of yourself. So am I correct?
Yes, absolutely. And the third one would be to do your best to find or integrate a little habit, or maybe not habit, but a little piece of self-care, they call it now. A piece of yourself that will ground you. So whether that's, you used to do yoga before you started caring for someone, or you used to dance once a week, or, exercise, finding, or, reading for 20 minutes, finding whatever that is for you, that is you, right? This moment of self-care, and incorporating that into your care, so that you don't fully lose sight of yourself. And when you have those really rough weeks, you have at least that one activity that can ground you and bring you back to a little bit of a baseline.
Okay. So even though you know that maybe your full-time quote unquote job for the foreseeable future, try to incorporate some of your old life into your new routine, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we talk about some, and then what are some of the assistance available for someone who's in that position, who needs to take care of an elderly relative?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that something that I see often is, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, it can be an overwhelming role when I speak for myself, because I speak for myself. I wanted to do everything. I was in school, I had a job, I was managing my grandfather's all his appointments, all his medicine. He lived with me and my mother and my father at the time, and so making sure he has his lunch and all of these things. My plate is full. I was wearing way too many hats. Thankfully, I was a lot younger at the time, so I was able to. But even then, it's taxing. It's hard on our body. And so what I didn't know at the time was there are actually a lot of resources depending on where you are in the world, and in the country, in the county where you live, depending on the health insurance. So there's so many tricky things there, but what I am seeing now online and social media is that caregiving is really rising. And so many more people are becoming more vocal about their experience. And so what I think, again, goes back to that is it's important to not only have the social support, but look into your area and look into those available resources, because there's actually a lot of resources in your community that are overshadowed. People don't know about them. They're often covered. They're free. So there might be an adult daycare. There might be, activities for your loved one. And so just do a quick Google search. And I think that can be very helpful.
Yeah, I know that in New York, there is some kind of assistance to have care, like a medical caregivers come in and relieve the family members or in the house with the primary care duties. I know in England, they have some type of social medical coverage for caregivers. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of assistance or similar assistance available somewhere like Canada. I can only speak for those three places. So, but I think you're right in that there is some type of community based or government based, if you will, assistance available
Mhm.
to help us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think something else that I've seen
Okay.
that I myself had tapped into
Uh-huh.
was just a quick while there's public help, there's also a lot of companies now that are in the private sector. So there's a companionship companies that you pay out of pocket, but you're going to get that experience
Okay.
right there and then versus waiting.
Yeah. 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 Makes sense. So you mentioned we talked about remembering to take care of ourselves while we're giving care, and that's one of the hard things for mothers to do, especially solo mothers. And solo mothers are already overwhelmed with taking care of their own children. And I remember I had a guest on, and she was taking care of her children. She was taking care of her mom who had dementia. And she was also taking care of her grandmother. And that's
Wow.
that's a really heavy space to be in. Remembering your own personal routine can help, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And these, these cases where there's so much, I mean, that's a lot of energy. Like you said, I think the great word you said was heavy, right?
Yeah.
In that regard, finding at least someone who can help for half a day would be tremendous. I can imagine just how much of a big little breath, right? Even in the morning, just like a moment, but 4 people can be quite taxing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right. So I had one other point that I wanted to ask you to address. The person who you're taking care of may not be helpless, right? They're not helpless, and they may be independent minded, right? So you're dealing with somebody who may not be bedridden, but they're compromised. Their strength or their agility is compromised. Do you have pointers on how a caregiver could navigate that? Because nobody wants to feel useless, right? Whether you're 900, you don't want to feel useless. You want to still feel like you're not totally helpless. I mean, that's how I feel, right? I don't know what I would be if I was, I couldn't take care of myself. So my mindset is that if I'm caring for an elderly relative person, I want to give them a little room to help themselves if they want to. Can you address that?
Absolutely. I think it's a remarkable point you make because oftentimes, again, as someone who is a natural caregiver, we want to help. And I imagine as a mother, I guess the term smothering, right? And I'm guilty of that because I just love to care.
Yeah.
But it's not always a bad thing, right? It's comes from a good place. But to your point, it's important that we are, at the end of the day, we have to see the loved one we're caring for as a human who was once independent. And that's the biggest thing that I hear the most from my clients in my field is that the older adults that I work with feel smothered. They feel, a little desperate that, I can't drive anymore. I can't move. I can't walk up the stairs. And from there on, we can only imagine what that feels like when a little part of our independence gets taken away, even if we're not, like you said, we're not physically bedridden or we can move a little bit. But to the point here is that giving that individual space and asking them, I think for me, I personally love to always ask questions about their life because we think, we've been conditioned to just kind of say, hey, how are you? How's it going? And we talk about little things here and there. But when you really ask someone who's been around for a lot longer than we have, ask, what was it like when you were in your 20s? What was your favorite activity? Did you play any sports? Like questions that we don't normally ask. And you'll find a lot of wisdom there because then you can incorporate that. So let's say your uncle liked to garden. It doesn't garden anymore because you can't get down on the floor. Okay, well, how about if we have the space, we can build a little planter box together. You bring a little bit of connection together. You can touch the dirt again. Or someone who used to like football. Bringing them a football and let them touch the football. So giving them a little bit of that dignity back.
Yeah.
And giving them the space to talk about it. But also, I think just personal space too, right? My grandfather had a story of, he was very stubborn as well, very stubborn man. And so he would say, no, I can do it myself. And, and there's resistance there. But at the end, I had to just learn to just take a step back and say, okay, let him try.
Yeah.
He feels that he can.
Yeah.
And when he needs help, then you can come step in. But if he's not hurting himself, just kind of watch from afar. It is hard, it's a little heartbreaking. But at the end, again, it just giving them that dignity to try. Because they lost that.
Yeah, yeah. So no matter how well you know the person, you don't just want to just, barrel your way into and just take over and, because I would assume that would make them more depressed, for lack of a better word, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So tell us what you do for your clients and how we can get in touch with you.
Yes. So I am a geriatric kinesiologist or physiotherapist. And so essentially what I do for older adults is I help with mobility. That's my favorite thing in the world to do. As a kinesiologist, it's basically the study of human body movement. But what I focus on specifically is if an older adult, you've noticed your loved one changing in their the way they're walking. So I help with mobility, but mostly when it comes to someone using a walker or a cane. Oftentimes, we get them from the doctor, the physical therapist, or they're gifted, or we pick them up at CVS. But if you really pay attention to anyone who's using a walker or even seeing someone outside walking, the walkers are almost always not set up correctly. So for anyone listening, I encourage you to just pay attention next time to see if someone's reaching over and really hunching down to grab the handles. That's a good sign that it's something's a little off. So what I do is I help assess the mobility aid that they're using. I give them tips and instructions on how best to use them. And then when it comes to adult children or anyone really who's caring for an aging loved one, or who's going through this transition, or a caregiver, I also help with those transitions and give some guidance and expert resources to navigate, kind of what we did today.
Okay.
And it's all virtual.
Yeah, well, I could see how that could be virtual. Okay. All right. And how can we get in touch with you? Give us their links and connects.
Of course. So you can find me at the website is Movement. So it's Movement in the French way, MOUVEMENT.info. And you'll find all these free resources on there. I have videos you can do at home. I have articles. I have podcasts that you can hear. And you can find all my booking and everything on that one specific site.
Okay. What's the name of your podcast?
Well, I'm not. I'm just my guest, but all my all my episodes are on Movement. So those that I have been. I had a former podcast, but right now it's on hiatus.
Okay. All right. So what is Mercedes grateful for today?
Well, what I am actually most grateful for is I have been traveling, so I'm grateful that I'm here with you. And I really get this opportunity to have this conversation. Like I said, my biggest thing in life, my purpose is to help people see the beauty that it is to be with an older adult, taking care of them and having that experience. So I'm very grateful that I've had this opportunity to be here and quite frankly, to be alive. Always grateful for that.
Amen. All right. Thank you very much, Mercedes Fernandez, for coming and talking to us on SoloMoms Talk. Do you have a one last word that you want to say before you go?
Yes, my last parting is the next time you see someone, whether that's at the grocery store or walking across the street, look at them in the eyes and smile. I don't think that we do that enough, and so I leave that with everyone today.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you, Mercedes.
Likewise. Thank you.